I still don't really understand how my next guest survived the collapse of the World Trade Center's North Tower. Deputy Chief J. Jonas of the New York Fire Department was a captain on 9/11. He led his men up the stairs of the North Tower trying to rescue people. After the South Tower collapsed, he decided to lead his men back down the stairs, assuming the North Tower's demise was imminent. But on the way down, they found Josephine Harris, who could barely walk. Knowing that rescuing her would slow them down and increase the chance they'd all die in the collapse, Jonas decided to take her with them. When they got to the 4th floor, the tower fell. Jonas was trapped with 12 firefighters, 5 under his command, 1 Port Authority officer, and Josephine Harris. Chief, you knew you were risking your men's lives and your own life to rescue Josephine Harris, and that the odds were you wouldn't save her either because she was so slow and the building was on the verge of collapse, and you were, on the 27th floor?
Yeah, we were on the 27th floor when the South Tower collapsed. That was our big indicator for us to make our escape.
So how did you decide to stop for her, knowing it meant you would all be leaving very slowly, probably too slow to get out?
Well, it was a lot easier decision for the firefighters under my command because they didn't really know that the South Tower had collapsed. I didn't know that till later. We experienced all kinds of earthquake-like rumbles. Our building swayed back and forth, and the lights went out for 30 seconds. And it wasn't really apparent what that was. And there was another captain on the 27th floor, Billy Burke, the captain of Engine 21. And I told Billy, you go check the south windows, I'll check the north windows, and we'll come back here. And I kind of felt that a piece of our building had just collapsed. That's why our building moved so violently. And he just looked at me and he said, the South Tower had collapsed. And I didn't realize it, but my firefighters under my command didn't hear the conversation with Captain Burke and myself. And I just looked at them and said, okay, if that one can go, this one can go. It's time for us to get out of here. And they looked at me a little quizzically because they had just climbed 27 floors with 100 pounds of gear on their backs. And I said, let's go. It's time to retreat. And we're actually making pretty good time going down the stairs. And once we made it to the 20th floor, we saw Josephine Harris standing in the doorway, and she was crying. And my guy stopped, and one of my firefighters, Tommy Falco, turned around to me and said, hey, Cap, what do you want to do with her? And it was, how can I put this? Every fiber in my being was screaming at me to get out of this building. Every second that we waste was 1 second closer to us not getting out of the building. But that's not what firemen do. We were there to save people's lives. That's the whole purpose for us climbing those stairs was to save someone. And that culture, that firefighter culture, overtook whatever personal need I felt to get out of the building. And I said, okay, let's stop and we'll save this woman. And it seems like it was a monumental decision at the time, but there was a true spirit of altruism within the building. And, it was the right thing to do. There was a lot of other firemen who were in that building who were doing similar things to what we were doing.
So since she had such trouble walking, how were you trying to get her down the stairs?
We took her arm, one of her arms, and put it around one of my firefighters' shoulders and Billy Butler's shoulders. And all the other firefighters in my company took some of Billy's tools and equipment, and we were actually carrying her down the stairs, hoisting her, that way. It wasn't until we got to the 4th floor was when she couldn't even support her own weight anymore. She fell to the floor and she started yelling at us to leave her. That's when I decided to break into the 4th floor to look for a sturdy chair that we could have put her on, and we can pick her up with her in the chair and we could run with her. And the 4th floor was not an office floor, so it didn't have any chairs. So I was way on the other side of the building when I just thought to myself, well, we're just going to have to drag her down the stairs. And I started running back to the stairway.
At what point did the building start collapsing?
Just before I made it back to the stairway on the 4th floor, that's when the collapse of the North Tower started.
So were you separated from the other men?
Matt Komorowski was waiting for me on the landing, and everybody else was on the next flight of stairs going down before they got to the half landing. The vibration was so violent that they all fell to the ground. Matt Komorowski was actually picked up by the air currents that were being created from the compression of air inside the building with the collapse coming down, and he actually got thrown down about two and a half flights of stairs. So I dove for the stairway, and I just covered up as best I could.
So you made it into the stairway?
I made it into the stairway. I made it to the landing of the 4th floor.
Can you explain how in the world you managed to survive when the North Tower collapsed on top of you? You were on the 4th floor.
The only thing that I can offer as an explanation is that the two buildings collapsed in two different ways. The South Tower collapsed differently than the North Tower. The South Tower collapsed. It kind of leaned over first, and then it collapsed because the way the plane hit it, it created a plane of weakness, similar to the way you would cut a piece of sheetrock or something like that. The North Tower collapsed the way it was designed to. These people think that they could fall over like a tree. Well, that's not true. They're not designed to be loaded like that. It actually collapsed in what's called a pancake fashion. And the building actually just kind of peels away, similar to the way you would peel a banana. And we were the banana. We were in the geographic center of that building. And everything just kind of fell outward and down. If you were a little higher than I was, the stairway was intact up to the 5th floor. So you would survive if you were up on the 5th floor. But if you were on the ground floor, you wouldn't survive because the weight of everything coming down would have crushed you. So you kind of had to be where we were, somewhere between the 1st floor and the 5th floor.
Could you just describe what you experienced as the tower collapsed on top of you?
Well, it started out, the floor started to move. And since the collapse started about 1,300 feet away, the sound was off in the distance, and it got louder as it got closer. And you could hear the floors hitting the other floors, and every time that happened, it created tremendous vibration in the stairway. And you could also hear the sound of twisting steel all around you. And it got louder as the collapse got closer, and the vibration got more violent as it got closer as well.
Were you shocked that you were alive after the collapse was over?
Yeah, my first thought initially was that I didn't get my men out. That was my first thought, that I had failed them. And I just covered up as best I could and hope for the best. And then the collapse stopped. And we were coughing and gagging, trying to get pieces of debris out of our mouths, our noses, our eyes. Yeah, my first thought was, all right, I wonder who else is still alive. And I gave out a roll call, and all my people were accounted for. And we had I didn't know Josephine's name at the time. I said, what about the woman? I said, yeah, the woman's still here. She's alive. So our initial thought was, okay, we're alive. Let's dust ourselves off and continue down the stairway. And word came quickly from down below that we couldn't get out from down below. So that's when we started our survival mode, I guess.
How did you get out?
Eventually, like about 4 hours later, the smoke and dust cleared enough outside where all of a sudden some sunshine started to hit the stairway where we were. And all of a sudden I could see a pencil with beam of sunlight hit the stairway. And I looked up and I see a little sliver of blue sky. And we were in the dark most of the time. So all of a sudden I realized that there used to be 106 floors over our heads, and now I see blue sky. I said, well, we're on top of the World Trade Center.
Oh, wow. You mean you're saying, like, but at this point the fourth floor was like the top floor because everything had collapsed beneath you?
Yeah. And it was at that point that we were able to, with the additional light, that we were able to figure out that we could breach a hole in the rubble and work our way out.
So you climbed out through what had become the top of the World Trade Center?
Yeah, the fourth floor at this point, because the rubble pile at that point was about 4 stories tall, about 40 feet high. So we essentially went out sideways and then down a little bit, and then the rubble was very uneven, so but right at that point, right where the B stairway was, it was about 4 or 5 stories tall.
So when you escaped the collapsed tower of the World Trade Center, did you allow yourself to experience the elation of surviving, or was your heart too heavy knowing about how many people had not gotten out of those towers?
Well, my first thought once I exited the rubble and I actually saw what it looked like outside, we really didn't know what it looked like outside. Just we're trying to get a visual from talking to different people over the radio. But once I saw the complete devastation, my first thought was, oh my God, I can't believe that I survived this. And you want to be happy, but you can't. Later in the day when I was being treated at an ambulance, one of my guys was talking to me. Tommy Falco was talking to me. He says, hey, Cap, how many guys do you think we lost here today? And I stopped and I thought about it, and I looked around. I said, oh, Tommy, I don't know. Maybe a couple hundred. And then I caught myself when I said that. I said, what the heck did I just say? I said, prior to that day, our biggest life loss was in 1966. We lost 12 firemen in the 23rd Street collapse. And I just said the words a couple hundred. And it turns out I was off by almost double, So it was hard to feel any sense of joy or accomplishment or anything like that. That looking out and knowing how much pain and grief that's going to be going on out there. Soon after I spoke to Tommy Falco, one of the there was a guy who was one of my contemporaries, Jimmy Ritchie's, came up to me, and